"Step out of the vehicle, sir." The voice cut through the engine's idle hum like a blade. The old Chevy Apache, dusty blue and sun-faded, creaked as it rolled to a halt beneath the concrete canopy of Highway 81's overpass. Its driver, Eli Gardner, didn't flinch. 91 years old, upright as a flagpole, his hands rested calmly atop the worn steering wheel. Two officers flanked the truck, hands near their belts, eyes scanning. "License and registration," barked the taller one, Officer Meeks, no more than 30, lean with a buzz cut that screamed regulation. Eli moved slowly, his motions deliberate. His jacket, military issue from decades ago, bore faint stitching where patches once clung. He turned his eyes toward Meeks, unbothered. "You sure you're safe to be on the road, Grandpa?" the second officer, Lewis, asked, his voice mocking. Meeks knocked on the fender with the back of his knuckle. "This heap should be in a museum." Eli remained silent, offering over his documents. His gaze drifted past them to the sloping hills beyond the lot, green and patient. The officers exchanged looks, opened the door, and ordered him out. An hour passed. Tension swelled with every onlooker's phone raised to film. Then a sleek black sedan arrived, federal plates gleaming. From it stepped a tall woman in a navy blue dress uniform, ribbons blazing across her chest. She walked forward with authority, scanning the scene like a battlefield. Her voice was cold steel. "Who stopped Brigadier General Gardner?" Silence fell. The officers turned. Meeks's mouth opened, but no sound came. Eli smiled faintly, as if remembering an old friend. "I did," Meeks finally said. He was driving erratically. The woman stepped closer. Her salute was crisp, precise. "General Gardner," she said. Eli returned it, slow and sure. "Major Jensen," he said quietly. "Took you long enough." Every Tuesday, without fail, Eli Gardner made his way to Walker's Feed and Grain. The route hadn't changed in 20 years, Maine to Jefferson, right at the Sinclair station, past the War Memorial where he once stood at attention with dozens of others, now cracked and forgotten. The Apache, a 1960 classic, rumbled faithfully beneath him. Its straight-six engine purred under the careful touch of a man who understood machines better than most people. The truck had belonged to his father, who'd taught him how to rebuild a carburetor before he could legally drive. After Vietnam, Eli took over the family garage and kept the Apache in showroom condition, waxy blue paint, chrome bumper polished every Sunday. Inside, the original bench seat bore only a single tier, patched with black tape so carefully it looked part of the upholstery. In the truck bed sat a crate of hay bound for his neighbor's goats and a folded army tarp he never left behind. Behind the seat rested a small leather-bound notebook, its spine worn smooth. His command journal. That morning, the officers didn't ask where he was headed. They hadn't noticed the veteran plates. They didn't care about the crisp way Eli had parked the Apache, precisely parallel, wheels straight, like a tank settled into position. They only saw an old man in a truck older than themselves. Officer Meeks pulled the notebook out from behind the seat. He flipped it open without asking. "What's this?" he muttered. "A scrapbook?" Gardner's voice was low, controlled. "That's my command journal. Afghanistan. Iraq. Bosnia. Notes on every man and woman I ever led." Officer Lewis gave a short laugh. "Were you a cook or something?" Eli looked him dead in the eye. "Infantry. Back in '03, Captain Eli Gardner led 42 missions through Helmand Province without losing a single soldier. Dust storms, night raids, mines, he knew the terrain like breath. His call sign was Iron Calm, a nickname gifted by his squad after he defused a live grenade with nothing but steady hands and sheer will. His soldiers trusted him more than the gear they carried. Gardner didn't scream in battle. He spoke. Clearly, directly. When chaos erupted, they looked to him. Now, decades later, two young officers rifled through his things like TSA agents at a terminal. Meeks held up a folded photo, black and white, creased. A group of soldiers huddled around a burned-out Humvee, faces smeared with ash and triumph. "You in this?" Meeks asked, but it wasn't curiosity, it was sarcasm. Gardner didn't answer. He didn't need to. He remembered the names, Perez, Kowalski, Bremer, Nguyen. He remembered the exact tone of the radio the moment the ambush call came through. He remembered the 3 hours they held that ridge until air support arrived. He remembered that only one of them cried, Nguyen, the youngest, when it was over. And he remembered the way Nguyen looked at him when Gardner put a hand on his shoulder and said, "You did everything right." Gardner had written that moment down in his journal. Page 47. June 13th. Reminded them tears are human. No shame in surviving. Now, Lewis thumbed through those pages with zero care. "Sir," Gardner said, gently but firmly. "Please be careful." Lewis rolled his eyes and tossed the notebook onto the seat. That notebook held the last known words of 6 different soldiers. It held GPS coordinates to villages that no longer existed. It held a hand-drawn map of a minefield Gardner once walked blindfolded, training exercise gone wrong, but they all got out. Outside, traffic rolled on, oblivious. Meeks leaned on the hood. "This thing even pass inspection?" Gardner said nothing. Silence was his blade now. A bystander emerged from the bait shop across the lot. Marcus Vega, a tall man in civilian jeans and a Marine Corps hat. He'd been picking up nightcrawlers for a fishing trip with his daughter when he saw the truck, saw the old man, saw the posture. Vega narrowed his eyes. He recognized the stance, back straight, arms loose, chin firm. That wasn't fear. That was discipline. He moved fast, dialing as he crossed the lot. "Major Jensen," he said into the phone. "It's Vega. Gardner's being stopped. It's not good. No respect. You need to come." He didn't know how she'd react, but he knew she'd come. Within minutes, more people began to gather. Not because of raised voices, there were none, but because something in the air had shifted. Stillness hummed like pressure before a storm. Phones came out. Recordings began. Gardner remained calm. His training pulsed through his blood. His fingers never trembled. He had faced down Taliban commanders, Russian mercenaries in the Balkans, and warlords in the desert who hadn't spoken a word of English but knew enough to fear his quiet. Now he faced 2 rookies in polyester uniforms who couldn't see past his years. Gardner didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He waited. He always had. "Sir, step away from the vehicle." Eli Gardner didn't move. He stood with his back to the Apache, spine straight as a drill sergeant's line, arms hanging loosely at his sides. The light breeze tugged at his jacket hem. His weathered hands didn't flinch. Officer Meeks glanced at Lewis, annoyed. "You hear me?" Lewis stepped forward, unsure. "You're making this harder than it has to be, sir." Gardner didn't respond. Meeks gritted his teeth. "You want to be charged with resisting?" Still no response. The crowd across the lot grew. What had started with Marcus Vega had become a ripple effect. Passers-by slowed their cars. Others, drawn by murmured phrases, "It's a vet. He's just standing there." What did he even do? Step from their vehicles. Phones came up. Screens glowed. A woman in a green windbreaker whispered to a man beside her, "He's not even arguing. They're just escalating it." Marcus Vega had stopped pacing. He now stood near the front, arms folded tight. He didn't shout, didn't heckle. His expression did all the talking, jaw locked, eyes fixed on Meeks like a laser. The bait shop owner, a heavy-set man named Pete Halvorsen, stood beside Vega, his own phone recording from a low angle. "You know who that is?" he asked. Vega nodded once. "I do. And so should they." Back at the truck, Meek circled Eli, trying to provoke. "This isn't your driveway, old man. You can't just park here like it's 1955. Gardner blinked once. "You don't answer, you're going to get cuffed." Gardner finally moved, only his mouth. "You have no probable cause. I did not break the law. My plates are current. My registration is in your pocket. And I have said nothing, threatened no one, nor obstructed your duty." His voice was calm, low, and without hesitation. "Step back," Lewis murmured. "He thinks he's teaching a class," Meek scoffed. "Save the lecture for the nursing home." Gardner didn't even look at them now. He stared past the bait shop, toward the hills. He was remembering another standoff. The year was 2006. A narrow valley west of Lashkar Gah. His convoy had taken fire. A single road out, surrounded by cliffs. Radio down. 7 wounded. Enemy numbers uncertain. Gardner had walked, on foot, up a 200-meter ridge without a spotter, crawling half of it on his elbows to reach a clear vantage. There, he laid out a defense plan with a mirror and hand signals. Every man made it out. The body camera wasn't invented yet, but the memory burned bright in the minds of those who lived it. Back in the present, Officer Meeks poked a finger toward the Apache's hood. "You're lucky I don't impound this." A quiet gasp came from the crowd. "He's out of line," someone whispered. Gardner heard it all. Not the words, but the pitch. The slow build of frustration. He had heard it in barracks. In war rooms. In bomb shelters. He had seen what happened when that pressure cooked too long. "Don't do it," he said softly. Meeks froze. "What?" Gardner looked him dead in the eye. "Don't make this worse for yourself. You're not listening. You're reacting." It was the same tone he'd used on green recruits ready to break protocol under fire. "I've seen your type," Meeks snapped, embarrassed now. "Think you're untouchable because you've got some stories." Gardner slowly lifted a hand and pointed, not at Meeks, but toward the crowd. "They're listening. You should try it." Behind them, Lewis shifted uneasily. He was younger, less sure. He looked toward the woman in the windbreaker, who now held her phone high and steady. "Dan," Lewis muttered. "Maybe we should back off." "No," Meek said, louder than necessary. "We're the law here." "Law doesn't mean right," someone called out. It was Vega. He stepped forward now, just enough to be heard. "That man trained thousands. He led troops in combat. He taught us restraint, discipline, patience. Everything you're failing to show right now." Meeks turned. "You interfering with a stop, sir? I'm a Marine. I recognize a superior officer when I see one. And I know when someone's being harassed." "Get back," Lewis said, uncertain now. "You called?" A new voice, sharp as a blade, broke the tension. The black sedan had returned. Doors opened. Major Alicia Jensen stepped out, her heels echoing on the pavement. Behind her came 2 men in civilian dress, DOD liaisons. Jensen walked directly between Meeks and Gardner. She didn't pause. "Brigadier General Gardner," she said. Gardner saluted. Jensen returned it without hesitation. "I apologize for the delay. We came as fast as we could." Meeks took a step back. "Wait, you're military?" Jensen looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You've been detaining a decorated war hero for over an hour. You've disrespected his service, tampered with personal effects, and made a public spectacle of what should have been a routine traffic observation, if that." She stepped closer. You didn't even run his name, did you? Lewis said nothing. Meeks opened his mouth, then closed it. Unbelievable, Jensen muttered. Gardner's voice was soft. He's young. Not trained to see the full picture yet. Jensen nodded. Then let's begin his education. The black sedan hadn't even finished settling when Major Alicia Jensen advanced, her presence as cutting as the metals on her chest. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her gait alone quieted the murmurs, stilled the restless camera phones. She faced Gardner with full posture and delivered a crisp, regulation-perfect salute. "Sir," she said. Gardner, unwavering, returned it with the kind of practiced grace that no longer needed thought. "Major Jensen," he replied. "You're out of uniform." "I had to be," she said, tone tightening. "They didn't recognize you." That statement struck Meeks like a slap. He opened his mouth, trying to salvage authority. "Look, nobody told us who he was. He didn't exactly announce." Jensen turned her head just enough. "It's not his job to announce. It's your job to observe. To respect." Lewis took a cautious step back. Meeks, red-faced, attempted a laugh. "You expect us to just assume every old guy in a truck is a war hero?" Jensen stepped in, squarely between Meeks and Gardner now, her voice controlled but steel-edged. "You're addressing the man who taught NATO's elite rescue protocol. The man who personally orchestrated the extraction of an entire medical team under mortar fire. The same man who pulled me and 7 others out of an ambush outside Kandahar when our convoy got pinned by insurgents." Meeks blinked. Jensen continued. "He did it with nothing but a flare gun, 3 smoke canisters, and timing you only learn through decades of command. He didn't ask our names. He just got us out. That's how we lived." Silence rippled across the parking lot. Gardner's gaze remained on the horizon, as if none of this impressed him. As if he'd rather not be remembered at all. Jensen wasn't done. She stepped toward the crowd now. "You want a list?" He served 38 years. Received the Bronze Star with Valor. Defense Superior Service Medal. 2 Purple Hearts. Combat Infantryman's Badge. And a medal from the French Defense Ministry for an operation in the Balkans that saved 42 hostages, none of them American. She turned slowly to face the officers again. "And yet, when you stopped him, all you saw was an old man in an old truck." Meeks's mouth worked but couldn't form words. Gardner reached into the Apache's cab and retrieved the leather notebook. The same one they had tossed aside without care. He dusted it off with his hand, slowly, almost ceremonially. "Notes from 20 years of operations," he said, holding it up. "You flipped through them like a menu." He paused. "Names of soldiers I buried. Coordinates of safe houses that saved entire families. Pages stained with blood and coffee and time." He let the silence settle. "Young men," Gardner said quietly, "you judged a machine and forgot to ask about its driver." A soft rustle passed through the crowd. Jensen let the words breathe before stepping in again. "I'm not here to discipline you in front of cameras. I'm here to offer an alternative." She turned to Meeks and Lewis. "You'll report to me. Twice a month. Voluntary program, on paper. In practice? Mandatory, if you want to remain in community-facing duty." "What kind of program?" Meeks asked, trying not to bristle. "A listening program," she replied. "Veteran-led. We sit. We talk. You listen. You learn to ask questions before assuming answers. You learn stories. Faces. Pasts. Because your badge doesn't give you all the facts, just the authority to seek them." Lewis looked at Gardner, uncertain. Why even offer that?" he asked. "We disrespected you." Gardner met his eyes. Because someone offered it to me once, he said. When I was 19 and full of answers, a sergeant took me aside and taught me how to listen. Changed the course of my life. Gave me something better than anger. Vega stepped forward, his voice clear. I'll help. I'll sit in on the sessions too. If these two are willing to learn, they'll need more than one perspective. Jensen nodded at him. Appreciated, Corporal Vega. Lance Corporal, he corrected. Jensen smiled slightly. Not today. More murmurs came from the crowd, but now they held a different quality, not agitation, but curiosity. Approval. Even hope. A teenage boy in a hoodie lowered his phone, nudged his father. That guy's a general? No, his father replied, eyes misted. That man's a damn legend. A little girl holding her mother's hand asked, Mama, what's a brigadier? Her mother smiled. Someone who knows how to lead without yelling. A woman approached Gardner, phone in hand. Sir, can I shake your hand? He nodded once. Of course. She took it reverently, then stepped back with tears in her eyes. Others followed. Not a mob. Not a frenzy. Just a slow movement toward understanding. Eventually, Meek stepped forward, uncertain. I didn't know, he muttered. Gardner studied him. That's the point, he said. You never asked. Jensen looked toward the sky. The clouds were thinning now. The wind had stilled. She spoke to the crowd one last time. Remember this moment. Not because someone got shamed, but because something got fixed. At least, it can be, if we're willing to do the work. And then, to Gardner, she said softly, permission to drive you home, sir? He shook his head gently. I'll drive myself, he said. That's still my truck. He opened the door, slid in with the careful precision of age, and closed it. The engine started on the first try. And as the Apache rolled away, it wasn't the truck people watched. It was the lesson, trailing behind it like dust in a sunbeam. The next morning, the video had already hit over 2.7 million views. A clip, only 48 seconds long, showed a man standing still beside a worn blue truck as two uniformed officers circled him. Then, a woman in dress blues emerged from a sedan, saluted, and spoke 5 words that lit the internet on fire. Who stopped Brigadier General Gardner? It didn't take long for the press to catch up. The town's police chief, blindsided by the story, released a brief, uncomfortable statement about procedural review. Mayor Lenton called for calm. But it was too late to steer the current. Gardner himself stayed home. Not out of shame, but to avoid spectacle. He didn't want his grocery run turned into a photo op. He'd lived long enough to know public interest burned fast and hot, then vanished without warning. But this was different. The calls began. First came Colonel Reyes from Texas. He'd served with Gardner in '92 during a multinational training op. Then a Canadian Special Forces officer emailed a statement of support. French and German military attaches sent official commendations. One retired admiral simply wrote, I owe him my life. Don't let this moment fade. The next day, Jensen stood at a press podium in the town square. She wore full dress uniform. Cameras clicked. To some of you, she began, this is just a story about age and respect. But to those of us who served, this is about more than honor. This is about recognizing quiet greatness before it disappears. She gestured toward a photograph of Gardner in full military dress, years younger, posted on an easel beside her. This man taught me to lead. Not just in war, but in peace. He never asked for credit. He asked for responsibility. The crowd cheered, reporters leaned forward, but Jensen held up a hand. This isn't just about him. It's about the lesson he gave freely, even when provoked. He didn't demand apologies. He demanded improvement. She stepped down, handed the mic to Chief Denton. His face was lined with fatigue and reflection. "We are initiating a new training protocol," he announced. "One focused on situational empathy, veteran engagement, and historical context. Every cadet will spend time at the local VFW, every officer will log empathy hours. It will be known as the Gardner Protocol." The applause was quiet, then swelling. Meeks and Lewis stood behind him, out of uniform, arms at their sides. When their turn came, they didn't offer statements. They simply stood beside Gardner in a small ceremony later that week, held inside the VFW hall. Gardner, now in a modest blazer with a single ribbon bar, accepted no praise. When called to speak, he said only, "I didn't teach courage. I taught preparation. I didn't lead heroes. I led people who chose to act, again and again, when it was hard. I'd rather you carry that than my name." He paused. "And if one officer listens before speaking, asks before judging, then it was worth it." Meeks approached him after the ceremony. His voice was quiet. "I started reading your journal, sir." Gardner's eyes flicked toward him. "Did you start at the beginning?" "Yes. Page 1. Then you know the first thing I wrote wasn't about war." Meeks nodded. "It was about a garden. And your father's hands." Gardner smiled faintly. "We fight to preserve peace, not to chase glory. Never forget that." From that day forward, Meeks and Lewis reported to Jensen biweekly. She didn't make it easy. They read history, attended workshops with trauma specialists, visited retirement homes, sat across from veterans and listened, truly listened. One afternoon, Lewis came across a name in Gardner's journal he recognized, his own uncle, Sergeant Harold Lewis, who died in Bosnia. Gardner remembered him clearly. Smart man. Sharper than his age. Could field strip a rifle blindfolded. Lewis swallowed hard. "I never knew." "Now you do," Gardner said. "Pass it on." Public perception shifted. A once dismissed veteran became a symbol of restrained power, of the strength in stillness. A mural went up outside the community center. Not a battlefield scene, but a quiet portrait, Gardner in his chair, notebook in hand, the Apache parked behind him. Beneath it, 3 words: listen. Learn. Lead. Meanwhile, complaints against the force dropped. Not to zero, but enough to notice. Every Friday, Meeks and Lewis hosted a veteran dinner night. Chili, cornbread, stories. A kid named Devin, a cadet, brought his guitar and sang Johnny Cash. Jensen sat in, off-duty, sometimes in jeans, sometimes in uniform. One night, Gardner arrived early. He walked slowly now, but still upright. Inside the hall, Lewis greeted him. "Sir, we added a few more stories from your journal to the Academy reading list. We're rotating them by decade." Gardner raised an eyebrow. "You think they'll read them?" "They already are," Meeks chimed in. "And not just the cadets. The town's library added a digital copy." Gardner exhaled through his nose. "Well, guess I better be careful what I wrote." Lewis smiled. "Too late. It's already shaping how we train." That night, after the last plate was cleared and the final story told, Gardner sat alone near the back. He looked around, not for approval, but for continuity. Young officers laughing with veterans, kids helping with dishes, Jensen and Vega in deep conversation. He didn't smile often. But tonight, he did. It wasn't pride. It was peace. He leaned forward and scribbled something into the back of his journal. "Legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's what we plant in others." 6 months had passed since that quiet standoff beneath the highway overpass. A full season had turned. Autumn had painted the trees, then left them bare, and now early spring was inching green back into the branches. Time, ever forward, had left its traces on everything but Eli Gardner's posture. He still rose at dawn, still read with his morning coffee, and still kept the Apache clean enough to see your reflection in the door panels. But something had shifted, not in him, but around him. At the police department headquarters, a framed sign now hung in the primary training room. Black letters on a brushed metal plate read, "The Gardner Protocol, respect first." Beneath it, a quote. "Listen before you decide. Understand before you act." The change wasn't just symbolic. It was operational. Cadets were required to shadow veterans at community centers, not as observers but as participants, serving food, taking notes, hearing firsthand what no textbook could teach. Officers sat through case reviews where they weren't evaluated on arrests, but on moments of de-escalation. Meeks and Lewis had become unlikely figureheads, not because they asked for it, but because they owned their mistakes and turned them into tools. Every Friday night, the VFW hall buzzed with activity. Veterans and civilians mingled over meatloaf, chess, and card games. Jensen often attended in plain clothes, laughing easier now, her guard softened. Vega brought his daughter sometimes. She always made Gardner a cup of chamomile tea before disappearing into a cluster of older vets who adored her curiosity. Gardner rarely spoke unless asked. When he did, the room quieted. One Friday, Lewis approached with a simple folder. "Sir," he said, handing it over, "we've integrated your journal's entries into the police academy curriculum. It's a whole unit now. Real-world wisdom. Page by page." Gardner opened it, reading the typed preface. It was written by Meeks. "The following is not doctrine. It's discipline learned through pain, through patience, and through decades of earned wisdom. These entries aren't rules, they're reminders. That people have stories. And stories deserve ears before judgment." Gardner nodded slowly. "Good. Now make sure you pass them down the right way." Outside the hall, dusk gathered quietly over the town. The flag atop the VFW swayed in the wind, silhouetted by the warm yellow glow from inside. Gardner sat on a bench by the community garden, watching kids kick a deflated soccer ball between rows of snap peas and tomato vines. He reached into his coat and pulled the journal, newer now, leather still stiff at the spine. The old one rested in Jensen's office, digitally archived, preserved. But the act of writing, of recording, remained sacred. On the page, he scrawled the evening's observation. Community, a word best understood not by definition, but by watching children play under a flag you once fought to defend. Later that evening, Jensen joined him. She wore jeans and a sweater, no ribbons, no title. Just Alicia. "You always write after dinner?" she asked. "Only when I've got something worth remembering," he said. She sat beside him. "You think they've learned?" "Some," Gardner answered. "Learning never ends. But they're asking better questions." She looked toward the garden. Meeks applied to become a liaison for veteran services. Wants to specialize in community conflict resolution. Gardner smiled faintly. "Didn't expect that." "He's earned it," she said. "And Lewis?" "He's leading a program for first-time offenders. Mentorship through service hours. Said something about fixing people before punishing them." "Smart," Gardner murmured. Jensen pulled something from her bag, a folded, worn paper. "You recognize this?" she asked. He opened it slowly. It was a page from his original journal. The page with the list of names from the Helmand Ridge mission. At the bottom, a note, "None lost. All accounted for." "I found this after you left it on the table 6 months ago," she said. "I had it framed for your family. Thought it belonged with them." "I've outlived them all," Gardner said, not sadly, just factually. "My brother passed in '09. My sister, last winter. No kids. No wife. Never had time for both command and home. Couldn't do either halfway. Jensen placed the page back in his hands. Then maybe it stays with the family you chose. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Inside the hall, a voice called out, General Gardner. It was Devon, the cadet with the guitar. You coming in? We're starting open mic night. Gardner chuckled, rising slowly. Only if I don't have to sing. Deal, Devon grinned. As he walked in, Vega passed him and gave a sharp, respectful nod. Good crowd tonight, sir. They're quoting you in there. Gardner shook his head. God help them. Later that night, during a break in the music, Jensen stepped up to the front with a mic. We talk a lot about leadership, she said. But we don't always recognize its quietest forms. Tonight, I want to present a special dedication. She held up a plaque. In honor of Brigadier General Eli Gardner, whose silence taught louder than shouts, whose steadiness shaped hearts, and whose legacy reminds us, respect isn't something owed, it's something shown. The room rose in standing ovation. Gardner didn't rise to take the mic. He stood only to nod and tap his hand to his chest once, humbly. Then he returned to his table. Hours later, the hall had emptied. Chairs were stacked, lights dimmed. Gardner lingered near the door, coat on, one hand resting on the frame. Same time next week? Lewis asked. Unless I get conscripted again, Gardner said dryly. Lewis smiled. We wouldn't dare. Outside, the Apache sat beneath a soft pool of lamplight. Gardner walked to it slowly, not because of pain, but reflection. He opened the door, slid behind the wheel, and paused. From the glove box, he pulled a new sheet of paper. He wrote. Legacy is not stone. It's breath. It passes on only when shared. Then he closed the notebook, started the engine, and drove home. Not to be remembered. But to ensure the next lesson would be ready when needed. Honor echoes.